Hi, I'm the narrator. For a better experience, leave me in the background, lie down and close your eyes. Enjoy these horror stories with the sound of rain. Story 1, The Last Bus. Marta hated taking the last bus home, but she had no choice. That night, the city felt emptier than usual. The neon lights outside flickered, and the streets were devoid of life. When she boarded, the bus was almost empty, except for an old man sitting in the back, his face hidden under the brim of his hat. She sat near the front, staring at her phone, trying to ignore the creeping unease settling in her stomach. The bus rumbled through the deserted streets, the driver silent and focused. Then, she noticed something odd. In the window's reflection, the old man was staring at her. But when she turned around, he was still sitting, motionless, his head down. Her fingers tightened around her bag. Maybe she imagined it. But when she looked back at the window, the reflection was closer. He was now sitting just a few rows behind her. But when she turned again, no, he hadn't moved. Her heartbeat quickened. She looked at the driver. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, his face pale. "Don't move," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "If he sees you move, he'll know you're real." Her breath caught in her throat. She stayed completely still, staring at the reflection. The old man's head lifted slowly. His mouth stretched into an unnatural grin, teeth too long, too sharp. His eyes met hers in the reflection, and he opened his mouth wider than any human should be able to. The bus screeched to a stop. The driver turned and yelled, "Run!" Marta didn't hesitate. She bolted out of the doors, stumbling onto the empty street. As the bus pulled away, she dared to glance back. The old man was standing inside, pressing his hands against the glass, smiling. But the worst part? His reflection was still on the outside, watching her. Second story, The Voice in the Walls. When Daniel moved into his new apartment, everything seemed normal. It was an old building, sure, but affordable. The only issue was the scratching in the walls. At first, he assumed it was rats. But then he started hearing something else. A voice. It began as whispers. Faint. Almost indistinguishable. But every night, it grew clearer. "Daniel, let me out." He froze. The voice came from inside the walls. One night, desperate for answers, he knocked on the drywall. There was a knock back. His stomach dropped. Heart pounding, he placed his ear against the surface. The voice was clearer now, raspy and desperate. "I see you. Please, let me out." Daniel ran out of the room. He barely slept that night, but by morning, the walls were silent again. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe the stress was getting to him. Days passed, and the whispers continued. Then, one night, he woke up to something new. Breathing. It was right next to his bed. Inside the wall. Slow. Heavy. A shadow spread across the ceiling as if something was crawling behind the plaster. Unable to take it anymore, Daniel grabbed a hammer and smashed the wall open. A wave of putrid air rushed out, making him gag. Inside, in the darkness of the hollow wall, he saw something. A pair of eyes, wide and filled with hunger, staring back at him. Then, something moved. Something crawled out. Daniel screamed. Third story, The Wrong Door. Emily lived in an old apartment complex. The building was strange, dimly lit hallways, doors that didn't quite fit their frames. But rent was cheap, so she ignored the weirdness. One night, as she reached her door, she saw something unsettling. The apartment next to hers, which had been empty for months, now had a door slightly open. But something was off. The door was the same number as hers, 304. Confused, she leaned closer. Inside, she could barely see anything, just darkness. A voice, soft and distorted, came from within. "Come inside, Emily." She stumbled back. No one should know her name. She turned to leave, but when she glanced back, her real apartment door was now gone. Only the open one remained. The hallway stretched impossibly long behind her. The lights flickered. Something moved inside the darkness. Panicked, she grabbed her phone and called the landlord. "The apartment next to mine. 304, someone's inside," she whispered. A long pause. Then the landlord spoke, his voice unnervingly calm. "Emily, there is no apartment 304. Yours is the last one in that hallway." Her breath hitched. She turned slowly. The door was wide open now. And something was standing inside, smiling at her. Fourth story, the thing in the baby monitor. Sarah and Tom had just had their first baby. They adored their little girl, Lucy. But after moving into their new home, strange things began happening. It started with the baby monitor. Some nights, static would crackle through the speakers. Other nights, Sarah swore she heard whispers. Tom brushed it off. "Interference," he said. One night, Sarah woke up to the monitor buzzing. Then, through the static, she heard a voice. "Shoo, don't wake Mommy and Daddy." She bolted upright, heart pounding. She looked at the monitor's screen. Someone was inside the nursery. A tall, shadowy figure stood over Lucy's crib. Sarah screamed. She and Tom rushed into the room. But there was no one there. Lucy slept peacefully. The only thing out of place was the baby monitor. It was turned off. The next night, Sarah unplugged the monitor. But at exactly 3:12 a.m., the speaker crackled back to life. A breathy voice whispered, "She's not yours." Fifth story, the house that ate people. Mark had always loved old houses. So when he found an abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town, he had to explore it. The front door creaked open on its own. The air inside was thick, suffocating. Every step he took echoed too loudly, as if the house was breathing around him. Then, he noticed something. There were no windows inside. Rooms twisted in unnatural ways. Hallways led in circles. The deeper he went, the more reality seemed to bend. The paintings on the walls watched him. Then, he saw the staircase. It spiraled down, impossibly deep. From the darkness below, something shifted. A voice, deep and hungry, rumbled from the depths. "More. More. Feed me." Mark turned to run. But the door was gone. And behind him, the walls started closing in.